Hi, this is David Smith again at Art of David Smith. So, following last week's dragon drawing, so the European dragon, I was asked if I could actually show the shading part of it. So obviously in the video before, it was mainly about how we form the dragon, the various guides I use to do a typical dragon like this. But then I was asked in one of the comments if I could go on and then shade it so you could see that. Obviously I didn't want to make the video too long last time, so that's why I didn't do it in that particular video. But so where we are now is pretty much where we left off in that other video. I've taken a line drawing off the sketch I did, that's why this is all cleaned up. So there's none of the guides in there. So this is what we was left with last time before I actually shaded the dragon off camera. So we're going to take it from this over to like the finished piece there. So obviously I've got my piece of paper so I don't smudge the line work what I've already got. Now obviously you start wherever you start. I tend to start around the eye area, try and get the eye detail, and that's really the same with whatever I'm drawing, whether it's portraits of people or portraits of dogs. I tend to work around the eye because that way if I get the eye correct I know the rest of the drawing usually from experience will fall into place. If you don't get the eyes right you really need to start again or erase what you've put in there and start the picture over again, start working around the eyes. That's just so vitally important. So what I'm doing is really picking out where I suppose the shadows, so because we've got quite a heavy eyebrow on this dragon, I'm putting in some of the shade what would be underneath the eye, and then again based on using the blending tool I'm just going to knock back some of that colour and soften the edges. So just done a little bit too much in there, so I'm going to take out some of that, whiten the eye back up. Now I've been asked a few times in regards to the pencils that I use. One of the things what I will do is do a more detailed video on all the equipment that I tend to use, but if you remember from the first video I mentioned about using the pump pencil, and that's simply because when I was going through university and I was drawing my plans up and stuff for products and whatever else I'd been designing, I was often using a pump pencil for accurate lines. And what would often happen even is as I was doing those plans your mind starts to wander and things like that, and I would often be doodling off there to the side. So I got into the habit of doodling with a pump pencil. The beauty of that is you're not having to sharpen it all the time, you can just simply give it a click, pump the lead further up, so you're not having to constantly be finding the sharpener out or anything like that. Now that's just something I do. You don't have to get yourself a pump pencil or anything like that. The lead what's in here at the moment is a HB, so if you get yourself a nice set of drawing pencils, and they'll often run from something like 4H right through to 9B depending on which kind of set that you get. You're going to have HBs in there, but typically a school pencil would be HB anyway, so just use those. You don't have to go out and start spending money on pump pencils just because I'm using one. It's just really it's habit with myself, so that's why I tend to do it. However, I do still go back to, in this version it's a Staedtler 4B. If I want some of the darker tones, I'll always go in with those kind of pencils. So particularly when you're drawing faces and things like that, you need those darker blacks for the pupils and things. So you need to get a set of B pencils. I tend to, I suppose the highest I tend to use nowadays is a 6B, but if you buy a set you'll get them right up to probably 9B. So, as I say, I'm just putting some of this shading into here. Picking out like the cracks and crevices in this creature's face. Obviously they're very lizard-like, so the skin is obviously going to be scaled and pitted, just like that of a reptile. Excuse me, just getting over a little bit of a cold this week, so I'm breathing a little heavier than normal and coughing about. So I say I'm just firing the shading into here. Start forming the face. A little bit of structure. So what I'm not going to bore you with is it's obviously drawing thousands upon thousands of scales or anything like that. What I'm going to do is, because this is really a working sketch rather than a finished piece of artwork, we're kind of putting in those key details. This is kind of how I would work up a sketch if I'd been commissioned, say, to do a book on dragons or something like that. This would be my working drawing then. So I would be looking at either scanning this piece in on the computer and working it up on with the help of Photoshop, or I would be transferring this onto some sort of canvas if I was going and painting that into oils or something, or even colour pencils. So once I've got this line drawing, I'd have been looking at then advancing this. So this is kind of a working drawing, if you like. This would be something what you'd possibly go and show your client, see if you're in the right ballpark in regards to what they've got in mind, or if you're doing this for yourself, this would be the guide, so that when you're painting this on via the computer or your oils or pencils, as I've mentioned, you've got a guide to which to work, so you know where the lights are going, you know where the shades are going. So put in these large spikes will run down the back of the spine. And in regards to the comments, I do really appreciate them, and I do try and read them all and answer them all. So if you've got a question, and one of the people actually approached me who's following the channel and had asked for their daughter in regards to the blending tools. Now obviously if you don't have the chance to go out to the shop, or you can't order any online, and like I said before, they're only a few pounds, but if you've not got that at the moment, what I tended to use for years were cotton buds, like what you would, I suppose, clean your ears out with or something like that. So with the soft cotton end, and they make great blending tools. And if you need something with a little bit finer detail, even a cocktail stick can be used to blend in and around these eye areas. So you can do things like that. Really, it's anything barring using your fingers, because you don't have that kind of control of detail when you're shading, when you're trying to I'm using my finger into there, there's no way I can get those fine details. So as I then start moving down the neck, obviously underneath the chinny area, there's going to be quite a dark area. It's the overhang of the face. So we're going to bring that down. And then what I'm going to do is look to, I suppose, emphasise some of these breastplate, what the dragon will have. So obviously on the underside, I'm going to pop in a little bit of shade onto those areas. We'll use the blending tool to soften this. Once I've got these softer tones in there, I can then go back in with my pencil and put some more of the more accurate detail into there. Obviously, because I've drawn a few dragons in the past, I've looked for reference for other artists who've drawn these, or looked to nature, so I've brought up reference picture of various reptiles and stuff like that, and used some of the how those creatures are scaled as inspiration for scaling something like this. So what I would advise is, if you are drawing your own, is bring up, use Google, go to images, pop in lizards, reptiles, and see the difference in the scaling, and use that as reference material, because obviously if you're using something out of nature, it's going to look that much better and more realistic, as if it could have lived itself. So yeah, do that. You've got all these great reference tools out there, so use them. So again, in with my blending tool, so we're imagining the light kind of striking the front of the dragon. So the underside of these breastplates is going to be the slightly darker area, and up to the kind of the right hand side. And again, I've drawn these lines a lot darker on here so that you pick up on the video these lines. If I was doing this for my own drawing or for a commission, again, these lines would be an awful lot lighter. I wouldn't want these finished dark lines on my final piece, so they'd be in there a lot lighter, so that I could erase them towards the end of the drawing, blend them out. Obviously around here I can blend these out by putting in increased amount of shadow and texture for these scales. And you want it to look a little bit gnarly and old and beaten up on these scales, so it's seen a little bit of action. You can put pits into them and things like that, little touches of scrapes and texture and things like that, just to really bring the overall picture to life. Excuse me. So as we start, obviously putting in these extra details into there, at some point on the head we're going to obviously come into what would be the scales. Now, traditional scales, you'd be doing something like this, like what you'd see on a fish, but for something like this, that'd be too much. These individual scales would be too large. So what I did on this particular drawing was like a bit of a crosshatch type of affair. So you're aware that the scales on the dragon, but because they're smaller, they kind of follow this diamond type of effect. and you can go in there and just pick out little areas, again adding in texture and things like that, but overall this intimates that there being scales onto this with this type of cross hatching type of effect. As you get further down, you can open the cross hatch up a little bit more, because obviously as the scales move further down the body, the wood naturally become larger. And follow the shape of the dragon round like that. Again, on the back of the neck, we're going to pick up a certain amount of shading in there, because as we've mentioned, the light's kind of coming down. So more light onto the front, shade towards the back, but not right up to the edge, because we're going to pick up some of the reflected light, what's bouncing around, onto the back of the neck as well. And you can increase this, but build it up slowly. It's a lot easier to add than it is to take away. So again, as we come further down here, start picking up a little bit more of that darker shade, and again, in with the blending tool, we soften those lines. Obviously we're going to take this now further down using this kind of method. You go all down the breastplates and down the back of the neck into the back area. However, as we start hitting the wings, underneath here, we're going to pick up a lot of shade. And again, this is a real animal, it doesn't have to be smooth. We can do a bit of a scrappy type of shade in this area, obviously, as it tucks in right behind this main part for the wing. This bone what would run through there, which is controlling the wing. It'll be dark as it's tucked in there, but as we come out, we lighten it, lighten it, lighten it, lighten it. And then again, we can knock out some of that paler area with the blending tool. As it comes further and further out, it pales off. Again, by using that type of shading and kind of wobbling it around in circles and a little bit haphazard, I suppose, it kind of adds a natural texture which is quite wing-like, certainly in my opinion anyway. So kind of all that around, and then we're going to blend out again, darker behind that strut on the wing, lighter as we come away toward the centre. Again, in this back area here, where the other wing is, a lot more shade into that area. This has the benefit as well of pushing this other wing, which is closer to us, forward, projecting that wing out and giving that wing a lot more solidity. Again, taking this further, on the outside of the wing, which this one would be, and obviously this part would be the outside of the wing. Play with the texture again. We can use the blending tool, which has kind of been loaded up with bits of lead, and use that actually to draw with. And what we can do at this part, play with patterns and things like that, offering a different dynamic to what possibly would be the outside of the wing. Now you can obviously do that in pencil, and you can even pick out little detailed areas to really accentuate what's going on this back wing. But play with this thing, experiment. It's a mythical creature. There's no right or wrong way. It's what feels right for you, what effect you're happy with. So you can see very quickly we start building up this outside texture to the wing and giving a very different dynamic from the tight scales which you would see along the neck and chest area of the dragon. Carry that along, and then in obviously these areas again underneath that wing would be a dark area as the varying struts of the wing all come together because it's shielded from the light. A very dark area, a lot of cross hatching into there, bring that down, and then we can go back into this shuffly sort of texture shading, and by playing with those different textures, and it can be this kind of shading, it could also be literally dot work as we refer to it, and you can do more dot work in certain areas and bring it out less. But what you're doing is you're playing with the textures, you're giving the, in this instance, the dragon real presence. You're really playing with the overall effects on there, making it feel more like a real creature rather than just plain flat shading. Again, into these areas I can play with detail in, and some pitting into there and things like that. Obviously the underneath of this strut would be a lot darker than the top. Obviously the underneath, it does pick up some light, but it wouldn't be white light. It's because it's reflected, it's paler than the back, but not as pale as what the front would be, which would be catching the majority of the light. So make sure you put some tone onto that area as well. Okay, throwing a bit of texture into there. Sorry about that. But I think you can see from just the bit what I've actually concentrated on here, how you can then start building your line drawing, what we did last week, into the finished shaded version, what we came up with at the end of last week's lesson. Obviously, as well, while I'm at it, I'll just the back legs and things like that, using the shape. What we're going to do is, we don't want to be showing a lot of detail of them. It's a sketch of working drawing, as we've already mentioned. So with these areas, we want to black them right out. Just put in that detail very loosely. And don't worry, people keep saying, oh, you make it look so easy. As I've mentioned, there's a lot of hours have gone into doing these things in the past. That's why it looks easier. You put in enough hours, you can make anything look easier. But I've seen some of the pieces that you've been experimenting with and drawing yourself. That'll be my daughter just dropping something upstairs. So again, with your blending tool, you can knock that back out as well, blend it out. So we're intimating that there's obviously a leg here, but we don't need to show a lot of detail. The eye and the brain will make those conclusions anyway, that that leg is further away because it's all completely in darkness. Again, with the other leg, we'd be doing that as well. We're getting into the serious undercarriage there of the dragon. So again, we'll be knocking that leg right back out and just concentrating our details on those legs which are closest to us. So I'll just quickly blend that one out before we look to finish the video off. So, just to reiterate, we took the line drawing from the sketch we did last week. We've cleaned it up, we've got rid of the lines, the working lines and all those things, and we've got a line drawing from which to work. For me, starting in the head area and around the eyes, we start putting in the detail. I tend to work from the darks and work out to the lights, and we start giving the overall piece structure. Obviously we accentuate the real heavy shadows like under the chin area and things like that, and then as we move down we soften. We put the scales in for literally for the scale of what this would be. We're putting them in nice and small with this crosshatch effect, and then as we go into the wing area, by using our blending tool or very softly with our pencil, we're then able to put in extra details, play with textures. And again, on the inside of the wing, we've played with textures as well in there as well, giving that real different feel of material. Obviously a wing, with it being like a membrane, some of the light passes through there and you can see the veins within inside it and things like that. And then at that stage, go in and we start putting in the little bit of detail, what we're going to finish with. So any cracks, any pits or anything like that, what you feel you need to put into this battle hardened beast, you can put in at that stage. Obviously you can take these lessons, I'll keep it quite brief for now, but taking these lessons into completing the whole of your dragon. So in the next lesson, what I'm going to move on to will be the Oriental type dragon which I mentioned, and then we'll do another video on how we're going to shade that one. So thank you for your time. If you've got any more comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. If you want to follow any more of my artwork, there's all links there to Facebook, Twitter, my other accounts. You can see some of the other artwork that I do. Please leave a like, and please don't forget to subscribe. All your subscriptions are really counting at the moment, and there's a lot of people subscribing to the channel, so please do so yourself, encourage others, and I'll catch you on the next video. But thank you very much, and thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.